That would be funny. Like the Today Show.
Hey everybody, you are live. We are live. We're all live with a new edition of Ask Dr. Jill, managing our mental health during the holidays. I don't know if you can hear the sirens outside my window. I apologize for that. Hey Jill, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm really excited, like really genuinely excited to get into this topic with you because I think it really resonates for people. Um, we were just talking about with one of our friends from the Mighty about like how we're all sort of trying to get stuff done so that we can then enjoy the holidays or a little bit of a break. But it's, there are a million different things that cause stress around this time of year, I think.
Yeah, and in fact, I noticed we didn't even introduce ourselves because we are feeling so pressed. So why don't we go ahead and do that first? Do you want to go first?
I would like to introduce you first.
Okay.
This is Dr. Jill Harkavy Friedman, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention's Vice President of Research. And
I'm senior now that I'm 65.
Oh, well, I think you're senior because you're so cool.
Well, that's true too.
And I'm Brett Ween. I'm the Director of Writing and Entertainment Outreach. And yeah, I just love having these conversations. So I think this will be a good topic to get into. And we have tons of questions we've already gotten in advance. So we're going to try and get to as many as we can.
Yeah, that really helps because, we were just talking about the pressures of ending the year and all the things you have to get done by the end of the year. And we didn't even discuss, all the social events and the holidays and what they bring up. And so, there's so much to talk about and unpack. So I think if people are feeling a little stressed right now, that's perfectly natural, whether it's about year end or holidays. And we got some great questions.
We did. I've tried to package them up a little bit because we got so many and I was noticing certain collective themes to them. So I've sort of organized myself around a few topics and I will try and throw some nuance as we have the conversation into them as well, Jill. But why don't we get right into it? If that's all right, because I want to hit as many as we can. So I wanted to start off with sort of general holiday mental health. People have written in, they've mentioned seasonal affective disorder, which is one of my favorite acronyms because the acronym is SAD, which I think is funny. So one person starts off on a very positive note. Any tips for having a more joyful holiday? And then in parentheses, the past few years have been stressful.
Yeah, I think that probably many of us are in some way or another feeling stressed, and I think that's part of the 2020 so far. Not that it's going to be that way forever, but there's a lot going on in so many different spheres. So I think there are some general ideas we can think about. One is that you matter, and so it's really important to focus on what makes you feel joyful or better. And also, if you're having feelings that are not joyful, to acknowledge them, but don't necessarily let them take over your holiday. A lot of it has to do with the basics, pacing yourself, food. So eat well, sleep well, drink water. I was to say, hydrate. If you want to be alone, take some time alone. If you want to be social, reach out to other people. And remember that you don't have to do anything, but don't let that lead you to being isolated because you're afraid of what might happen. So what I mean by that is if you want to socialize and you want to go places, you can go and then enjoy where you are, but leave when you're done. Come late, leave early, whatever you need to do to feel well and take care of yourself. But if you're taking care of a mental health condition, make sure that you are doing what you need: therapy, medication, meditation. I can tell you that right before this, I had so many meetings today that I needed some air. And I went outside and just walked around a little bit to take take those literally 5 or 10 minutes to recenter. So whatever works for you, it's a good thing to keep in your back pocket and to do. There's no, you must do this and you can't do that. So learn about yourself and what makes you feel better, what gives you stamina, and mostly be compassionate towards yourself and respect yourself.
I think you touched on one big theme, Jill, which is this tension between the individual, yourself, and then around the holidays, there's a lot of, I think there's a tension between that and other people, whether it's your family or your friends. So I wanted to read one specific question because I think it's just written in a very interesting way. Some people wrote in talking about anxiety, that it's heightened anxiety around the holidays. Some people have written in about, one person wrote, why do I feel guilty about depression during the holiday season, which is really interesting. But let me read this one question. Quote, I just want to learn how to cope with the sad emotions I feel every year around Thanksgiving to New Year's Eve. I suffer from depression, and it's sometimes hard for me to just be happy. I try my best to put on holiday music and decorate my home. I do anything I can not to give into that sadness I feel inside, but it just seems like it lingers. So my question is, what are some coping skills that AFSP can suggest that can help me out right now? You mentioned some, Jill,
Yeah,
that I thought were really great.
Well, I think a lot of people think that because it's the holidays, they're supposed to be happy. And if they're not happy, then they're doing something wrong, right? Because you're supposed to be. But the truth is, you feel what you feel. And sometimes just acknowledging where you are, what you're feeling. If you're feeling sad, try to identify if there's anything in particular that's making you feel sad. So, for instance, a lot of times people feel sad because they've lost someone and that person isn't with them during the holidays. So you can find a way to, in essence, bring them with you. Whether you literally bring a piece of something that reminds you of them, or you think about how they would enjoy something or they would hate it, and it's okay if you do too. But you don't have to abandon all the other feelings that you have just because it's the holidays and the music is playing and people are partying. I can pretty much guarantee you that you're not alone. These holidays can be very emotional. And, you know, the saying, it's okay to not be okay. And there's no rule that says you have to be happy and joyful. You can just be whatever you feel and acknowledge it. But it doesn't have to be the only thing you feel.
That's so well put. And we did get a bunch of, I want to skip ahead to, since we're touching on it, is loss, that you know, for people experiencing loss. One person wrote in, do you have any advice for handling the anniversary of a suicide loss around the holidays? That's, I think, a big question that people have.
Yeah, I think that is a big question. I think anniversaries around loss in general, or birthdays of people that you've lost, or memories, it's a very individual thing, what's going to feel right for you. You know, some people do something special. I know people who, for instance, light a candle. I know someone who lets a balloon go. Something to mark that anniversary. It's not something to be avoided. That person was important to you. And I think what happens with suicide loss is sometimes we lose track of the reasons that we loved somebody and get very caught up in the way they died. So if you can bring a picture or a memory that reminds you of what made that person important to you, that can make a big difference as well. So if there's a way that you can emotionally or physically bring that person with you, that's one way that you can cope. Other people don't want to think about that person at that moment. And they think if they go out and they're having fun, that might mean that they're forgetting the person. But that's not how it works. You're not forgetting the person. If you're laughing and having a good time, you still miss the person. You still had them. Your brain is actually still processing and healing even while you're not thinking about them on a formal level. So if an anniversary is important to you, then it's important to mark it. That can be very helpful for people. Some people have a ritual Some people do something new each year, but something that acknowledges your feelings associated with the loss. And I don't want to assume what you feel, but acknowledge the loss. But the whole holiday doesn't have to be about the loss.
Jill, you're so smart. You're getting to some of the questions before I can even ask. That was a big one. People have asked about holiday traditions and how to incorporate that into it. And so that's great. And another thing that people have talked about is it's kind of a tangle of emotions. I mean, one person wrote in, it was my son's favorite time of year. It's so bittersweet now, so thick with memories. How can it make you smile and break your heart all at the same time? And I think that person, I think that may have been meant as a rhetorical question to just express themselves, but I wonder if we can get into that a little bit of this mixture of emotions people feel.
Well, I think that's just it, that we can feel many emotions and many powerful emotions at the same time. What I find is that it's really important to acknowledge each different emotion, because if you get them all tangled up, that's often what leads to anxiety, because anxiety is a state of discomfort, right? But if you can sort out the emotions that you feel, then you can address them. So I think it's very natural, and we're kind of lucky that we can feel different emotions at the same time, and we're not stuck in one emotion. And that's something about resilience, about being able to allow yourself to feel the deep pain of losing your son, but then also smile when you think about what he did, or something that made you laugh when he was alive. You can bring him to life, and also the people who are right in front of you. Also being present in what's happening in front of you. And if it's not working, give yourself some grace and compassion. You don't have, if it's too uncomfortable, you can change what you're doing. You don't have to force yourself to be in one situation. But our capacity to feel different feelings at the same time is, I think of it as a gift, because you have some really loving, happy feelings about him. And I'm not talking about one person's son, but the people we lose. And we may actually have anger towards him, and we may have sadness, and we may have all kinds of feelings. But it's important to acknowledge the many feelings that you're feeling, so they don't get all jumbled.
It kind of reminds me a little bit. I was telling people earlier today, actually, it came up for some reason, but like I lost my mom, her birthday happens to be the same month as when she died. And so I'm in a pretty good place about it. Most years, I tend to just naturally focus on her birthday. I think of her on her birthday and not the memorial. But that month does get, I feel both things at different times, and it's sometimes different from one year to another. It's sometimes kind of the good and the bad at the same time. And so I think it probably is the same for a lot of people around the holidays, because we're all conditioned to have these nice memories or nice expectations around the holidays. But, as we talked about, there are a lot of pressures too, and it might be really painful when you think back to someone who's not around anymore.
And I would suggest that we don't all have nice, loving feelings around the holiday. In fact, that there are people we have no interest in being with. There are things that we just don't like doing as much as there are things that we do. So I think part of coping with the holidays is making decisions about what you want to do, and allowing yourself to focus on that. Certainly, you don't have to invite people you don't want to invite, but you may be going someplace where there are people that you don't feel comfortable with. And so having a plan for how you will deal with them in that moment can make a big difference. If you know somebody's going to be there that you find toxic, you don't have to talk to them. You don't even have to talk to people who are talking to them. You might come prepared with, if you do have to talk to them, with one or two statements or topics that you're willing to talk about with them, and then you move on. You make some space. You go outside for a walk and shake it off and come back in. Or you go to the restroom and you just take a breath and then go back out. So I don't think it's wonderful, joyous, all the tone is that it's supposed to be that way. But I think for many of us, it's a mixed bag. It's not all those things. And so we have to find the joy and let go of the things that are not good for us.
Well, there's one question I want to make sure we get to, because I just find this one really interesting and so specific. Kind of tugs at my heartstrings a little too. Again, on the subject of loss, how do you deal with, and they put in quotes, friends? How do you deal with friends who just ignore you after your child dies? You're not invited to the usual holiday gatherings. That's so interesting to me, because often when we're talking about suicide loss, a lot of really well-meaning people may kind of back away because they don't want to say the wrong thing. But this, with the holidays and not being invited to things, I'm curious what your response is to this one.
I think that people don't necessarily know what to do when someone has lost someone to suicide. It's kind of like when somebody gets a cancer diagnosis, right? There are people who run towards and people who run away. And it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with their own feelings of comfort or discomfort. And, there's research that shows that talking about your story, your loss, and connecting with people allows the healing to happen more effectively, and actually can lead to what we call post-traumatic growth, meaning even with the deep pain that you feel, you find some new things that motivate you and move you forward. So part of what I'm saying is, if people are running away and you would like to be invited, you might have to reach out to them and let them know, just sort of back channel, hey, what are you doing for the holidays? I'd love to see you. You don't even say, I heard you're having a party and I'm not invited. You can just, even though it's hard, reach out, and rather than assume that they don't want you, I would often assume that, well, I don't like to use the word assume, because as soon as I use the word assume, I know I'm wrong. I would find out. That's my new code of, if I'm saying assume, then that means what don't I know? So I would find out if they are just uncomfortable with me, or if there's some other reason. And if they were, friends, it's most likely that they're just uncomfortable. And so sometimes reaching out to them and just, like I said, how are you doing? What are you doing for the holidays? I haven't seen you in a while. I miss you. I know it's hard to talk because of my child, but I'm still here, and I'm, still want to be your friend.
I want to flip that question also, because we also got a question from someone else. How do you support someone who, maybe it's around the holidays and someone who has lost someone? What are some ways to include them or reach out to them and help them feel supported?
We always talk about having a real convo, meaning just let them know. Let them know that you're thinking of them. They may want to come out, they may not want to come out. Everybody is different. But if you have someone who has a recent or a long-term loss, and this time is difficult for them, you can send them a note, or I should say a text, drop off casserole, or check in and say, I know the holidays can be tough for you. How is it going? Do you want to talk? You can say, I'm sending you a hug and thinking of you. And that might lead them to reach out to you. So there's nothing to be afraid of. You're not going to make them worse. They already feel terrible. But you might make them feel better by connecting with them. And so even the smallest little gesture, sending a holiday card, could mean something. You don't have to disrupt the relationship that you had with them because they lost somebody. In fact, that's a time to double down and be there even more. And it's as simple as just starting a conversation and checking in.
Well, we got a lot of questions about family. And I think the common theme a little bit was kind of surviving the family and during the holidays. And I also want to make sure we get to some questions that people are writing in the chat now.
Hmm.
So why don't we get to one of those first, and then we'll get into some other questions about family.
Okay.
Um, any suggestions for surviving family functions as a recent smoking quitter?
Mm. Yeah, quitting smoking is a big one. And I guess I would think about what have you been doing so far to not smoke. A lot of it has to do with planning and being kind to yourself and making no assumptions that anybody else has any idea what's going on with you. So life is going to be full, hopefully full of all kinds of interpersonal events as a person who no longer smokes. You have habits that you're used to doing when you smoke, and they may emerge again in a party situation, particularly if there are other people smoking. So I would start with a plan of what you're going to do when you crave a cigarette, and bring things that help you with that. Now, for some people, it's like chewing gum or hard candy. For some people, it's stepping outside for a little bit. Um, I wouldn't recommend supplementing it with drinking too much because that's not going to go well. But whatever you've been doing since you quit smoking, you can do that and even do it more, or plan for the fact you may want to have a cigarette and acknowledge that, and then make a decision not to have it. That's a hard thing to carry out, but the more clarity you have about what's going on, the more likely it is that you can make that decision. And so if you're a smoker who smokes when things get stressful, try some other coping mechanisms. Breathing is a great one. It's highly portable. Nobody even has to know you're doing it. Just take some time to take 3 breaths, in on the count of 4, hold for 4, and let it out. And nobody has to know you're doing that. That may be a better coping mechanism than having a cigarette um, or getting anxious because you can't have a cigarette. And I think that's true with alcohol or any other habits that we have. It could be overeating. It could be all kinds of things, but go in with a plan, a coping plan of what you're going to do at different levels. Maybe it's kind of like a safety plan. What can you do if you just feel a little uncomfortable? Who can you talk to distract yourself if you are really craving a cigarette? Who can you commiserate with and say, man, I really want a cigarette? And make sure you don't have any cigarettes with you, and don't try to access them, because it'll pass and you'll feel better maintaining the no smoking.
You just gave me an idea, Jill, that I think is more general than just the specific smoking question. But people have written in, how to handle family who trigger bad mental health. And I'm wondering if you're going into a family situation where, you would hope that family is supportive of you, but, let's be real, not everybody always is. I wonder if would it make sense if you have like one family member or one person who's going to be at whatever gathering, and you maybe reach out to them first and I'm even wondering if you can have a safe word or something. If you're just like, if the stress is getting to you in the moment, you can signal over to your buddy that you need a little help and maybe excuse yourselves and go chat or something.
Oh yeah, that's a wonderful idea to have a coping buddy, where you signal that you need to make an exit from this person and they can come save you. But you don't even, if it's possible, I don't want to say anything specific like generalization, because I don't know what you're dealing with when you go into that room. There could be 3 people and you're the third person. And so, one of them is toxic and one isn't. But remember, you don't have to enter toxic situations, and you can decide either not to attend, or you can decide, I'll smile, but I'll walk away from that person, even if they come up to you. And if they do come up to you, you can say, I really just need some space. I'm going to go talk to so and so, or I am going to go to the restroom, or I'm going to refresh my drink, or whatever. But you are not a victim. You do not have to be with toxic people. And it comes from inside. If you convey to somebody, I'm okay, but I'm just not into it, they will get that message 9 out of 10 times, not everybody. But it's okay also to walk away, to start another conversation. I guess what I'm saying is don't let somebody be toxic to you, that you don't have to accept that.
Yes. How about one person wrote in, how can you cope with if you're your family's sort of mediator slash therapist for all of their problems? That's something that comes up sometimes, and I'm curious what your response is to that, Jill.
Yeah. By the way, I want to say I don't have all the answers. I'm just trying to take what we've learned from research, which says a sense of self helps people to cope. Taking breaks and removing toxicity brings the stress level down. Sharing distress helps people to then de-escalate something so that they can monitor it. So I just want to say, this all sounds great here, and I'm saying, oh, you should do this and you should do that. But the reality is you can come up with something to do, especially if you think about it beforehand. So I just want to say I do not have the answers, but now I forgot your question.
My question was, do you have all the answers, Jill?
I really don't want to have all the answers. That would be very boring in life to have all the answers.
But you often have some pretty good answers. So
I can see the question is right there. How do you cope if you're the family mediator or therapist? You don't have to be. If you can choose to be the family mediator or therapist, or you can put it, leave people's issues to the people that that are related to the issue. Like if you choose to take up that role, then I guess you could do what you're regularly doing, to be in the middle. That's really what you're saying. But direct communication is often much more effective. Do you ever play telephone when you were kids? Almost always the first message that the first person gives is different from the message that gets to the other person. So enforcing or encouraging direct communication between people who are having difficulties and stepping out, or maybe mediating by keeping the tone calm, but it's their issue to work out. And you can't ever work it out because it's their issue. We all have, therapist isn't there to give you ideas about what to do, right? They're there to help you figure out what you could do, because it's your life and you're going to be living it and making decisions. And so it's not always a helpful position to be in the middle. And especially if people don't ask you to be in the middle. So have a conversation. I feel like I'm in the middle. I don't want to be in the middle. You guys work it out. I've done that with my family. If you check in with my family, when one person comes to me, I am a therapist, but in my family, I'm not a therapist. So one person says this and the other one says that. And then I catch myself and I'm like, you guys talk about it. I'm not going to translate this message and be the mediator, but it's easy to get caught up in that. And then most of the time when you do, either they'll work it out or they'll walk away because they don't want to talk to each other.
People have written in a couple different things from kind of the same thing from different angles. And some people are feeling left out. They're not invited to family events. And at the same time, people have trouble. Yeah, it's people having trouble being around people, but also not being around people.
Right. Right. And you might be being left out, which feels terrible. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. Sometimes you're not, but you feel like it. So you kind of have to do a reality check about, I think of like, especially holiday events are kind of like like planning a wedding. You have the immediate group that's definitely coming no matter what. Then you have the larger group if you're going to have a larger party. Then you have the people, like if I invite one of them, I have to invite all 12. So I'm not going to invite one. And so there are many reasons why people are not invited to an event. And we don't always know. Many people will call and say, hey, I wanted to come. But if you're not invited and it's not the place for you, even though it hurts, try to pivot and find or create some place where you can have an event. But it hurts to not be invited when other people are invited. There's just no way around that. But find alternatives or have a conversation and find out if there's a reason. Because if you don't know the reason, you can't make it better.
And so the flip side of that coin is what can you say, Jill, to if you've been invited somewhere, maybe could be a trip to another state, it could just be across town, whatever it is, and you don't feel up to it this year. Mm-hmm. Is there something you can, give people that they can say to explain or tell the person who's inviting them that they're just not up for it this year?
Yeah. I mean, the truth shall set you free. It's okay to say, I'm not up for it this year. That's enough. And they say, oh, come on. Really, I've decided that I'm just going to lay low this week, or I'm only going to one party instead of 5 parties. It's okay to just set some boundaries and say no. You're not hurting anybody. You can say it in a very nice and caring way. I'd love to, but I just don't have the bandwidth. I'm just not up for it. I'm looking forward to being at home, polishing my nails and watching the ball drop on TV. Whatever it is, whatever you feel is okay. And that's it.
Are you trying to tell me that I need to polish my nails?
One of my best New Year's Eve was it being in my bathrobe, polishing my nails and watching the ball drop. And that's what I felt like that year. I had places to go, but I just didn't want to. That's what I wanted. And it doesn't mean that's what you want forever, or you're never going to see the person. You can say, I don't have the bandwidth now. When I feel better, let's make a date.
I found that too, that there's some years you feel like being around people, and then there are some years that it feels amazing to just kind of get in your jammies and do whatever makes you feel good. We use the word tradition often in kind of a lofty way, but an occasional tradition might just be, getting some Ben and Jerry's and like watching a movie and doing whatever truly makes you happy.
Well, yeah. And sometimes it doesn't work out. I mean, when my kids were little, we got all dressed up. My kids were in like velvet outfits and we went to a party. But by the time we got out of the car, one of my kids had pink eye. And they were like, I'm sorry, you can't come in. So there we were. So we went home, we ordered in takeout, and we made a party. And it wasn't what we had hoped it would be, but it turned out we had a great time. And the people were disappointed that we couldn't come in, and we were disappointed we couldn't be here, but we still ended up having a good time. It's about flexibility. It's about, if this doesn't work out, I can try that. And sometimes just planning that out, or in that case, we couldn't plan it out because she didn't have pink eye when we left, but by the time we got there. So you can't always plan everything out, but you can make some self-care decisions. Make an entry plan, make an exit plan. Those are 2 good plans for holiday events.
That's a good idea. I want to get to a much more serious question, if we can. One person wrote in, well, what do you say to having to attend events where your family members have invited perpetrators? That's how they've phrased it. So I assume someone who has hurt you, maybe in a very serious way. It's at least very serious to you, whatever it is. How do you handle that, Jill? I don't know what the answer is for that.
Well, I don't think there's a right answer. And I think it depends about how you feel being in the same room with that person. I think it depends on if the other people know that that person was a perpetrator or not. And unfortunately, sometimes people aren't believed when there's a perpetrator. Sometimes they think it's past, and sometimes they just don't know. So really, it has to do with how you feel, what kind of conversation you want to have about it, and whether or not you want to go. And you can't just let perpetrators make you avoid things and not have the life you want. But you don't have to talk to them. You don't have to be near them. You can even tell them, stay away from me. You can tell anybody who knows that there's a perpetrator there to help make sure that that person doesn't come near you. So you can have some control over your space to make sure that person's not near you, who knows and who doesn't, and then act according to how you're feeling. But don't try not to let that perpetrator have more power over you, because they already did that, and it's not theirs to have.
Thanks, Jill. I want to get to, there's a whole other topic we've gotten a bunch of questions about, and it pertains to people with lived experience who regularly struggle with their mental health. One person writes in, why is it still so hard? I'm 10 years out post-attempt. It's not one bit easier, they write. I truly thought knowing why the holidays are difficult personally would lighten up some, but no matter how hard I fight, it is heavy.
So, one of my first questions for anybody who's struggling with this and struggles with that or anything regularly is, are you seeking therapy? Because therapy, the goal is to understand what is going on and what the patterns are so that you can change them and you can make some decisions. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have the same feelings. It means when you have those feelings, you can make different decisions. So the first thing I would say is, hopefully you have a therapist that you can speak with. And if you need medication, you're taking medication that can help you. In other words, taking care of your mental health, doing things that increase your resilience, and acknowledging what you feel, and finding the words to put to it. Finding the words to what we feel can help us to give it a place so that it doesn't take up more room than it deserves. And it may be that every holiday you have some of the blues, but it doesn't mean it has to consume your whole holiday. So you can find things that make you feel better and acknowledge that this happens, but try to do other things that make you feel better, that build your resistance, and also things that are replenishing. The holidays can be exhausting. And so we really want to do things that replenish us so that we don't end up depleted at the end of the holiday. For some reason, it reminds me of when we work, and we go on vacation. And the second we're on vacation, we get a cold because we've depleted ourselves so much and forgot to replenish along the way. And then when you have time for it, you get a cold. I don't know if you've ever had that happen, but I certainly have. And I know other people who have. So
Absolutely.
it just may always bring sad feelings, but that doesn't mean you can't we were talking about being able to have more than one kind of feeling. And it doesn't mean that you can't also have more positive and more comfortable feelings.
Someone else asked, and they brought up a very specific kind of situation or feeling that I really appreciated. I know what they mean. They say, how do I give myself permission to not be okay when surrounded by people with good intentions wanting me to be okay? That's an odd bit of pressure that I think a lot of people have definitely experienced.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry. Everything's fine. It's the holidays. Just have some fun. Yeah, I think that, people want us to feel happy in the holidays for ourselves, but also because it's more fun to be with people who are happy than people who aren't. They probably want you to enjoy it. But it's okay. Again, it's okay to not be okay. And to just say, I'm not feeling great, but it's okay. I'm okay. It's just a down period, or I'm okay. I'm working on things, or I'm going to get through the holiday and hopefully I'll feel better soon. Um, and it's okay that I don't feel okay. I appreciate your concern. Um, if you want, you can call me next week and see how I'm doing. But know that it most likely comes from positive intentions. They want you to feel happy, but it's okay if you're not. But then think about, are you in the right place when you're not feeling okay? Are you in a place that's making you feel worse? In which case, maybe there are other places you could go or be. Or maybe there are other people to talk to, or you don't feel great, but you're glad you're there.
I can so picture this person in this situation. I imagine, and they're in the middle of some holiday gathering, and the other person is kind of taking a moment to like really say like, hey, be real with me. How are you doing? I know you struggle with your mental health. And it's almost like it's on you to give that person permission to enjoy the rest of the evening.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's a way to kind of frame it for other people as a health situation, which, I mean, you and I know that mental health really is an aspect of your health. So maybe think of it as though, like, yeah, I have a health thing going on, but here I
Right.
am. And
Right. I'm not feeling that well, but I'm good enough to be here, and I'll be okay. But and it doesn't, if they're not really offering you a conversation in the moment, and probably a party is not the place to have that conversation. You can say, call me, we'll talk. Either way, like, I'm not going to talk now, but I do want to tell you what's going on. Let's talk when we're not at a party. Or, hey, I see you're not feeling that well. This is not a great place to talk. Can I call you? Either way.
a lot of people have written in specifically about loneliness, which we've touched on a little bit, but let's just say whatever the situation, you're alone during the holidays. How can people really kind of strategize around that so that it's not so hard?
Well, I think being alone and loneliness, literature suggests those are not the same thing. Right? We just talked about, polishing your nails in your bathrobe and being quite happy by yourself. So I think we want to, and also when we make attributions to other people, if somebody's alone, it doesn't mean they're lonely. It means check in and see if they're lonely. One of the things that happens when people have mental health conditions is that their thinking changes and they feel alone, like they don't belong and they have no one, even though they do have people in their lives. And so they may feel people are better off without me. People don't want me around. I'm a burden, nobody, I don't belong. All those feelings. So it's important to check out whether that's really true, or if that's for instance, your depression talking to you or your anxiety talking to you. And so that's the first thing I would say. Just because you feel lonely doesn't mean you're alone. And check in on those thoughts and what's generating those thoughts. If I'm nobody came to me, and so here I am all by myself, well, then reach out to someone and get together with somebody. But check your perceptions about whether or not you really are alone and whether or not there really is nobody for you. And frankly, in this day of both group gatherings and social media, you're not the only one. I bet if you go online and check out groups for people who are lonely, you can find other people to be with who understand what you're feeling. So I think not just accepting I'm lonely and I have no one. And if you really have no one, then find a way to work on your relationships and on yourself so that you can have some people if you want them. But that sense of loneliness and being alone is often when your brain is not functioning optimally.
That's so helpful, Jill. Thank you for that. So we've got about 15 minutes left.
Okay.
And we've now entered, I've collected these in different buckets. We've now entered what I call the potpourri category, where it's because I clumped a bunch of questions around loss and around general mental health. These are some really interesting questions I want to get to for our, the final 15 minutes or so. How do you politely opt out from gift giving? I just can't afford it, and the anxiety is waiting on me.
Oh my gosh. Gifts are a whole nother level of stress. There's, should I give a gift? Shouldn't I give a gift? What should I give? How much should I spend? Are they going to give me a gift? Are they going to feel badly if I give them a gift and they don't give me a gift? Gift. So it's what I like to recommend. First of all, check in. If you're going to an event, find out if there are gifts or not. If you don't want to give a gift, you can just say, I'm not giving gifts this year. If you have a gift for one or two people, but you're not going to give everybody at the party a gift, that's fine too. You can just do it privately. You don't have to necessarily do it in front of everybody else. But if you want to give someone, find a way to give it to them. And if you don't want to give someone a gift, you don't have to. It's okay to just say, I'm not giving gifts this year. You don't have to make the person feel particularly singled out. Or I'm not giving everybody gifts this year. I'm only giving gifts for $10 or less. You can set parameters for your gift giving, and then you just state what it is. I only decided to give 5 people gifts this year. And you're not one of them. I'm just giving family gifts. I'm not giving non-family gifts. There are so many ways to. You don't have to report to anybody about whether or not you're giving them gifts, but you don't have to lie either. You can just be honest about what led you to decide not to give the gift. There's a lot of anxiety about gift giving, about whether it's good enough. Is it expensive enough? Am I giving too much compared to what other people are going to give? And so one way to manage that anxiety is to make some decisions for yourself that make sense to you. And then it becomes very much more comfortable, I won't say 100%, to just relate that if someone asks.
This next one, I think it's so interesting how events like the holidays can just bring such specific things up that we might sort of be feeling in general, but then we feel them more keenly around the holidays. Someone asked, how can you overcome anxiety and dread that your family are aging out and dying all around you? That's very hard hitting the way they explain. But yeah, aging relatives who you're worried might not be around all that much longer. It does seem to come out around the holidays.
This is where my family motto, I think, can be helpful, which is know when it's good and celebrate it. And it came from just that, having a lot of losses and realizing we need to be present, and it's, celebrate what we have instead of focusing on what we might not have. And what we have isn't always optimal either. People may not be at home. They may be in a nursing home or assisted living or bedridden, or seize what you can. And that's what you can do. Providing comfort to somebody who is aging out is a beautiful thing. And just, like I said, seize that moment and know when it's good and celebrate it, rather than focusing on they're not going to be here next year. And if you have that feeling, you say, they're not going to be here next year, so I better be with them this year. And know that you have a sadness about that. Again, it's about acknowledging the many feelings that you're having. And they may not be able to celebrate the way you want to celebrate, or you wish they could celebrate. So, but what you have is what you have, and it's what you get. So you can feel badly about it and worried about what if, or you could be present.
So this next one is really interesting to me. It's a little bit of a longer question, but it's worded so it's such a fascinating kind of aspect to consider. They write in, how can we better normalize conversations about holiday grief? Not grieving a person, but grieving the holidays when they suddenly come to an end in January. My
Mm-hmm.
depression flares the worst after the holidays pass because we are just left with winter weather and really nothing to look forward to after. I'm working on it in therapy and went up on my medication to get through this time, but I feel like there are a lot of others who struggle when all fun ends.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's like one of the myths is that there's a higher rate of suicide during the holidays. That's actually not true. And it may relate in part to this question, which is during the holidays, at least you have things to look forward to or to say you're not going to do. I'm not going to do that over the holidays is still something to focus your life. And it's not uncommon after the holidays are finished to say, now what? And so, well, one of the things that I personally don't love the short days. So what I do is we turn the clocks back in November. It used to be October, so now it's only 6 weeks. So I remember that it's only 6 weeks, and on December 21st, the days start getting longer, and then I notice it because by December 23rd or 25th, it's actually lighter, longer, maybe 5 minutes. But it may be yesterday it was dark at 4:30 and now it's dark at 4:40. So looking for benchmarks, just the way you use the holiday as a benchmark, setting up other benchmarks that make you feel good, setting up other goals around things that you can look forward to. They can be big things, they could be small things. If anybody follows me on Twitter, you'll know that I tweet daily goals to help frame the day. And Mondays, it's 3 goals for the day and 3 goals for the week. So goal setting and having something to look forward to can make a big difference. Taking care of, seeing your therapist, taking your medication. The seasonal affective disorder is a real thing, and it's very hard for some people. There are different kinds of interventions that can help, like ask about light therapy that can be very helpful for people. But what you said was, in the holidays, I look forward to the holidays, but then what? And so create the what, and create things that you can look forward to. And some of them could be like summer, but some of them could be a special meal out. You're going to read a book. You're going to finish a book by a certain time. You can't wait for so-and-so's new album to come out or new video game or whatever. And that can be a way to get through because you have this and then nothing. And just, you don't have to create nothing. You can create something.
Jill, I'm so glad you mentioned that about the 21st and it getting lighter out, because you remind me of it every single year, and every year it really helps, because I hate that it gets dark out so early. And
we're only a few days from the days getting longer again.
Yeah, no, that helps to know, and it is shorter this year, the amount of time that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So that's helpful. I think we probably have time for one last question, and someone just wrote in. I want to make sure to take this one. This is my first year without my mother. I lost her on Christmas Eve, 2021. How do I work through this?
Well, healing is a process, and allow yourself time and the process of grieving. And healing isn't, it's fun. We just shared some information from research, and healing isn't letting go, it's learning to live with the loss. And allow yourself to feel whatever it is that you feel is okay. If something helps you to feel a little better, or doing something special, that could help. But the first year, sometimes people find the second year even harder than the first, because the first year you expect to miss them. The second year, you're still going to miss them. And that's where developing traditions, finding ways to bring them along with you, not focusing on the death and the loss, but focusing on what you had together. Those are some things that you can do. But it's going to hurt, because if it's a loss and you cared about them, it's going to hurt that they're not there. So the goal is not to not hurt. The goal is to keep them in your life and love them and remember them, and also live, laugh, and be merry. So finding that balance. But the first year is hard, but don't be surprised if the second year is harder. Even if the year and the time you're feeling better, when the holiday or the anniversary comes back, you might, those feelings might come back because you're sad.
Thank you, Jill. And yeah, just best wishes for anyone out there who is going through anything like that, or whatever it is. So many people have written in such great questions today. So any final, we have like 2 minutes left. I wonder, what were you about to say, Jill?
No, I was going to say that we bring so much and so many expectations and questions and worries and expectations to the holidays, which is kind of how we started. And so I think that it's not going to be all of anything. It's going to be a little of this and a little of that, and that we can create what we want during the holidays. And we don't have to do what we've always done. We can do something different, or we could do what we've always done, or we can do what we've always done in a bigger way. It's really about understanding what your needs are in the moment, and reaching out and connecting if you feel like it, and being compassionate and respectful to yourself and those around you.
Thank you, Jill. And I wonder if you have any closing thoughts on, we're not quite at the holidays yet. You mentioned how people, gear up for it and then they get a cold the second that it starts and they get away. What can we do right now to kind of mentally prep for the holidays? Last question.
I think we can pay attention to what our hopes and expectations are, and then try to make them happen, and try to reframe and differentially organize those things that we're worried about happening. Is that? Yeah.
Yeah.
My 4 words, so I have to say them, right? For me, it's all about compassion, respect, patience, and persistence. And allow yourself to have a good time, or to just take a rest, but take care of yourself. That's what's important during the holidays. Don't allow yourself to be depleted, and it's really up to us to do that for ourselves.
Well, we are right up against 5 o'clock, so I want to thank you, Jill, for having this great conversation and taking these questions, and I want to thank everyone watching for tuning in with us today. And
thank you, Brett.
Oh, thanks.
Always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure. Jinx. If anyone out there watching has suggestions for new topics for us to focus an episode of Ask Dr. Jill on, please write them in. We would love to hear from you. Sometimes those are our best topics. And I'll just wish everyone happy holidays and however you spend them.
Yep. Wishing you whatever will make you feel okay.
That's great. And thanks to the mighty. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.